Alright, test requirements, New York Code, rules, regulations, gas utilities, scope 501. This section 255.503 to 255.17 of the part prescribe minimum leak test strength test requirements for pipelines. General requirement: no person may operate with a new segment of the pipeline, return to the segment of the pipeline, and reconstruct, relocated, replaced, reactivated, and left that has been tested the of the part to substantiate the proposed maximal operating pressure. Each last leak has located and eliminated. The test medium must be liquid air, natural gas, or inert gas, incompatible with the material with which the pipeline is constructed, relatively free of the sediment material. Like 3, spec for natural gas and non-flammable in the air, natural gas, and inert gas. Give the test medium the following maximal hoop stress and limitations apply. Each well used must tie in the test segment pipeline. Expect with the test requirements of this part. If a component other than the pipe only item to be replaced with added to the pipeline strength test after the installation is not required, the manufacturer of the component carrier certifies that the component was tested at the least pressure required with the pipeline which is being added. The component with the manufacturer under quality control system and ensure that each atom manufactured at least equal in the strength of the prototype, that the prototype was tested at least for the pressure required with the pipeline which is being added. Component carrier with the pressure rating established for the applicable the ASME ASI Manufacturer Standard Society of Valve and Fittings Industry MSS specifications by under strength calculations described in section 255.143 of this part. I think we just read general requirements. Strength test requirement of steel pipelines over operating 125 psi gauge or more. Each segment of the steel pipeline operating at a pressure of 125 psi must have strength according to the section of the substantiate proposed maximal allowable operating pressure. Test pressure should be at least equal to 90% of the system yielded strength of 1.5 times maximal operating pressure, which is left. The test medium may be debarred with an inert gas air of the phase. These to be operated 20% of the system yielded strength. Any class location facility to be operated at 125 psi or more. Class 4 locations medium that may only be water and if there are no buildings in with a human occupancy within 300 feet of the pipeline facility being tested prior to approval granted by the Department of Youth, the air and inert gas test medium, except for the provided subdivisions F and G with the section of the strength of the test must be connected with the maintaining the pressure and above the test pressure at least 12 hours after the stabilization. Calibrated recording pressure gauge they indicate with an increment of 5 psi gauge or less. Where practical, show detail for the test section of the gauge must be calibrated at least hourly with the first 2 hours at least. Calibration against the dead weight test the equivalent device attached with the test section of short length with the pipeline in which not backfilled with the wear throughout its entire length with its circumference can be readily examined the visual for the detection link of the differentiation of the test member due for the 4 hours of stabilization at least 5 business days prior to the starting of the starting with the test. The operator shall notification order maintain continue with the service during an emergency short of notice of the permissible test under the section not considered the satisfactory accomplished unless certified by inspector of the department. Test requirements: pipelines operating less than 125 psi each, except for the strip of each segment of the pipeline operated less than 125 psi are tested in accordance with the section. Is test pressure for the 90 psi gauge at 1.5 times the maximum operating pressure, which with the greater. However, the maximum test pressure for the plastic pipeline may not be more than 2.5 times the design pressure for the pipe determined under the section 255.121 of the spot. The temperature may not less than pipe temperature during the test. During the test, the temperature for the thermoplastic material may not be more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. With the temperature at which material's long-term hydrostatic strength may be has been determined under the list of specification which is greater. Test medium should be water, inert gas, or air, except the provided subdivision F. For the section test must be conducted with maintaining the pressure above the test pressure for at least 1 hour. Every stabilization calibrated pressure gauge shall be indicated with an increment of 2 psi gauge or less shall be attached to the test section. For plastic insertions less than 1,500 feet length, the test duration shall be 30 minutes prior to the insertion, followed by a 30-minute test after insertion. Any inspection allow all visible portion of the pipe of the damage. Test requirements for service lines. Scope the steel service lines greater than 2 inches for the nominal diameter of the operated with a 125 psi gauge. Each segment of the service line must be tested in accordance with the section of the to be placed in service. Steel service lines greater than 2 inches for the nominal diameter of the operated with a 225 psi gauge. More tested in accordance with the section 255.505A through F of this part, except for the copy of the service line with the test pressure with the 90 psi at 1.5 times maximum operating pressure, which with the greater held with the maximum test pressure material temperature during the test pressure. Plastic service line with must be according to the section 255. 255.507B of this part. For copy, service line with a test pressure with a 50 psi gauge, 1.5 maximal allowing per operating temperature, whichever the greater. However, the minimum test pressure may not be more than 3 times the design pressure of the pipe. The test medium shall be water, inert gas, or air. Test duration shall be the service line 2 inches. The smaller per operate with 120 psi, 15 minutes. 2 service lines 2 inches operating at 120 5 psi, more 2 hours. Service lines greater than 2 inch operating less than 125 psi, 13 minutes. And the limits of the test shall be the main to one following points. In the case of the inside meter regulator, for each segment of the service line intended with the operator with the pressure of less than 1 psi, the reverse fitting inside of the wall of the customer structure from the service meter of each segment of the interior service line. Operator below 1 psi gauge must be tested the operating pressure when placed with the lieu of the test required in subdivision C of the section. If each segment of the service line intended with the operator with the pressure of at least 1 psi gauge, first fitting upstream of the meter with the interior piping intended with the operator with the pressure of at least 1 psi, but more than 4 psi gauge may be given a leak test of the pressure not less than 50 psi gauge lieu of the test required under subdivision C of the section. In this case, the outside meter, the meter regulatory section setting of the meter riser valve, if any of the first fitting of the riser upstream of the regulator valve when one is installed. In this case, the inside meter when the outside regulator, the first fitting of the riser upstream of the regulator, the service line with the connection may need not be included with the test. If it's not feasible for the hour, there must be given the leakage of the test operating pressure placed to the server. The test indicate the service line test is calibrated pressure gauge marked in 5 psi gauge increment service line with the operated 100 psi gauge or more. For tests on lines operated less than 100 psi gauge, the test indicator must such that if any lost pressure can be readily detected. That was 511, testing requirements of service lines. Alright, environmental protection, safety requirements. In conjunction with the test of the part, each operator shall ensure that to keep the persons not working on the testing operation outside of the testing area until the pressure is reduced or to below the proposed maximal allowable operating pressure. The operator shall ensure that the test medium is disposed in a manner that will minimize the damage of the environment. Alright, 255.517 records. Each operator shall maintain to retain the useful life of the pipeline record of each of the tests performed under section 255.505 to 507 of this part, but each record must contain at least the following: operator's name and the name of the operator's employer responsible for making the test, the name of any of the test company, U of the test medium, U of the test pressure, test duration, pressure, record charts, other record pressure readings, elevation, variations, whenever significant particular tests, leak and failures noted for their disposition. Each operator must maintain a record of each of the tests required in section 255.511 of this part for at least 5 years. And that was your test requirement section.